It's so good to see each and every one of you. I was just reminded this week, especially for a day like today, and I hope this would be the cry of our heart every Sunday when the psalmist wrote in Psalm 122, verse 1, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. And I hope you rejoice when you have the opportunity to come and be in the house of the Lord. Can I encourage you to take your Bibles and turn to the book of 1 Kings? The book of 1 Kings, that's over in the Old Testament. We'll be in chapter 8 in just a little while. It's going to take a little while to get there, but we will get there. What's interesting, you may not be aware of this, but we're actually coming up on a 2-year anniversary around here. It was almost 2 years ago that our world made a major change. Not only our world, but our community, and even some of the things that happened right here at 6227 North Main Street. As we all know, it's almost been 2 years ago that the coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, pandemic began around our world. Now, I don't bring this subject matter up to debate whether or not you believe in the COVID-19 or whether you feel this way or that way or whatever it might be. What I'm trying to do is create a picture for a point of reference. The point of reference is this. We did our very first ever online service of Second Baytown on March 22nd, 2020. March 22nd, 2020, first online service. And in reality, I think I've confessed this, but I'm going to go ahead and confess it now in front of everyone. We actually pre-recorded it, and we played it as though it was live. We fooled you. But that's all we needed to do at the time. In fact, we were working on our technology and on our equipment, and thankfully we started gathering more equipment and better equipment to be able to do live streaming, and of course our staff did a phenomenal job, but that was the beginning place. March 22nd, 2020. Now, if I had to say today, this is my opinion, you could disagree, but if I had to say if there's been one word that's been a predominant word over the past 2 years within Baytown, United States, the world, it'd be the word fear. Fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of getting sick. And let's be honest, for some, the fear of dying. Now, I've spoken about this before, but, personally for me, the first year, from March and probably even a lot longer than a year, I would tell you, and I think my family would share this with you, I am not an anxious person. I have never really dealt with anxiety, but I shared this with you before. That first year, I probably struggled with anxiety at a greater level than I've ever faced it in my life. And it wasn't that I was fearful of dying. I mean, let's be honest with you, I love what Paul writes, to die is gain. But I wasn't fearful of dying, and honestly, I probably should have been. I wasn't even really fearful of getting COVID. I mean, after I had my little bout with it, I probably should have been a little more fearful. What I was fearful about and what I was anxious about, just to be honest with you, is I was fearful in the role that I was in, that I would get it and not know that I have it and give it to someone else or give it to my family or, have someone get sick because of me. And man, there were just moments of anxiety, and I'll be honest with you, moments of fear that were overwhelming to me personally. And I believe, and I may be wrong, that probably many of you in this room and many of you watching online experienced the very same thing. We as your staff, we tried to do our best to lead during a pandemic. You probably know this. I didn't go to seminary, but if I had, I promise you, there wasn't classes on how do you lead a church during a pandemic. It just doesn't happen that way. And we did our best. And trust me, we didn't do everything right. We succeeded at many things and we failed at many things. I got the emails from people that, said we were being too uncautious, and others that felt like we were being way too cautious. And but this word fear was just overwhelming. I was thinking about it, but our worship arts team, all of our folks that do the sound and the tech and all that they started doing things that they'd never done before in their lives. Live streaming services and trying to put stuff together and meet a certain time frame and delay starts and all this kind of stuff. And our children's ministry started putting on just live stuff that, and actually Brandon and his team, everybody was just pitching in, doing stuff that they had never done before. And to be honest with you, if we went back and looked at it now, we'd probably cringe at some of the stuff we put out. It's like, did we seriously do that? That's goofy. But we just did the best we could with what we had. And we felt like just because we're in a pandemic doesn't mean, or it doesn't even diminish at all what we've been called to. And our calling was to lead people to Jesus Christ and develop more fully devoted followers of Him. And we knew that for us, the measurement, at least one of the measurements that we use for fully devoted followers, someone to worship and connect and to serve and to invest. How do we get folks to do that in the midst of a pandemic? Now, what's interesting, another point of reference, is our last in-person worship. If our first online service was March 22nd, of course, that means our last in-person worship was March 15th, 2020. And if you can remember back to that time, that was right in the middle of spring break. It was really right after the president had actually told the country to kind of start shutting down. We had one final Sunday where we went ahead and had church. People were out of town on spring break trips and all that kind of business. And on that Sunday, I want you to hear this, on that Sunday, out of 4 services, because we had 3 on Sunday, 1 on Wednesday, out of 4 services, we had 634 people total. Now, since that day, March 15th, 2020, except for Easter, Christmas Eve, I don't know, I think that's about it. We haven't seen 635 people in this building on a given weekend. Almost 2 years. We celebrate when we finally push the 500 mark. And I want you to let that sink in for just a moment. Pre-pandemic, we were asking people to sit in overflows, and we were running 4 services, and we couldn't find seats. Post-pandemic, we are where we are. And I've come to the realization, as I'm sure maybe you have, maybe you haven't, and this is a tough realization for me personally, is that church is maybe not ever going to be what it used to be. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say woe's me, because when some people see a negative, I tend to look at the positive, because maybe we don't need to be what we were before. Maybe we need to be something different. And I want to say this now, and I hope you hear my heart, and I will hopefully say it over and over and over again during this talk. I realize some of the things I'm about to say, I realize that we are actually in another surge of COVID. And more than likely, who knows, I just don't know anymore, We probably will enter into another surge at some time or another. We don't know what the future holds, but there's this word that God has been speaking to me personally about that I want to throw at you today, and I be honest with you, I hope it sticks. Kind of like, throwing a wet noodle up against a refrigerator. And it's the word faithful. Faithful. Because no matter with all of our hearts, God has called us to be faithful. Not faithful to a preacher, not faithful to a building per se, but faithful to his cause, faithful to his story, and faithful to his gospel. See, what's very interesting, and many of you may or may not know this. I mean, if you saw some news, you might have seen some of this, but unlike the great state of Texas, there were many other states and many other places where churches were forced to close completely down. I mean, we actually, just another point of reference, we had our last service on March 15th. We had our first in-person worship service on May 31st. But there were churches after that May 31st date and way beyond it that were not allowed in their areas to meet in person. Now, it'd be, people in Texas were like, you ain't doing that to me, I'll get my guns, I know how you think. And so, but other places. And so we kind of have this attitude. We think, man, we'll never be faced with that. We live in the state of Texas. I mean, but I ask you, what would happen if there came a day where churches were no longer allowed to meet together? I know that'll never happen. That'll never happen. That's what our parents said about prayer being in schools, right? I could go on. I want you to understand my heart. I realize that I'm talking to a decent number of folks in this room right now, but I really want to talk to those of you who are watching online. Because my question is, and again, I want to be very, very sensitive to where you are, like if health reasons and things like this, but I really want to ask, why have you not come back? What's keeping you from in-person worship? I mean, I get it. And please, I'm not minimizing, not trying to shame anybody. I get it if there's a health situation that you have to be extremely careful of. But to be honest with you, there are many people who have not come back to church since COVID started. And I'm assuming, I'm just assuming that the concern is COVID. But if you watch social media, I guess there's no COVID at baseball games. I guess there's no COVID at football games. There's no COVID at the theater, Disney, shopping malls. The only place you can get COVID is the church, I guess. You know I'm being facetious, right? As a pastor, as a leader, it burdens my heart. And I get it. It doesn't make you more spiritual to be in this place. That's not what I'm saying. It doesn't make you more spiritual if you're at in-person worship. But I will say this. There are certain things that are spoken about in Scripture that speak to the benefits and the blessings of meeting together with other believers. And there's a specific one. We recently talked about this idea of that you should never give up the idea of meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. And that's my fear, is that because of COVID, some habits have developed that are not good habits. I mean, one of our very first core values that we talk about here at Second, it's one of the things that we use to describe someone who's becoming a more fully devoted follower of Christ, and it's the word worship. Now, don't get me wrong, we talk very clearly about how we define the worship idea. The worship idea is how you live your life. In other words, it's not necessarily what you do up here. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's really what you do 24/7. It's how you live your life around your neighbors. It's how you handle your employment or your employees. It's how you handle your students or your teachers. It's how you handle everything outside, your attitudes, your actions, what you do with your money. Does it really reflect the lordship of Jesus Christ? That's worship. But then there is the physical act of coming together in worship. And so can I just lovingly ask you, I mean, I know you're here, but can I ask you, can I just lovingly ask you, would you consider in 2022 being faithful to in-person worship? Would you come back? Again, if you have a health concern, please, by all means. But I just don't want you to be robbed of some potential blessing that God would want to do in these moments. And since I am one, can I talk to parents for just a moment? Parents online. You're sending a message of priorities to your kids. You're sending it. If you can make it to stuff outside the church, but you have grown comfortable to only staying at home, and I get it, we provide the worship service, but it's not the same experience. Having your kids involved in student small groups or small groups with kids and things like that. So I do want to share this. As a result of we've been reevaluating a lot of stuff. And we think there's one hiccup that we've had that we weren't really paying attention to, and it's this, our service times. For a long time now, our services have been at 9 and 11. The reason we started that is because COVID, we were doing cleaning, and we were trying to leave plenty of space between services to do a lot of cleaning and things like that. And then, of course, CDC threw those guidelines out, so we don't have to clean anymore, but we left the space. And so what we've seen, I don't know that this is just anecdotal across the board, but what we have seen is that there were some people that were coming for worship, and after worship was over, they didn't really want to hang out for an hour to serve the next hour, so they just left. Or they might come and serve an hour in the first hour, and then they didn't want to wait around for an hour for church, so I'll just go home and I'll watch church online. And so starting February 6th, we're changing the first service time to 9:30. Second service is still going to be 11 o'clock. So it's going to be 9:30 and 11, 30-minute gap between the services. And I'm just, I guess this is kind of a fireside chat. What our hopes are for you that are even in this room, even folks watching online, is that you would re-engage in serving again. Not just coming to church, but serving. So that you would choose maybe the first hour to serve, come to church the second hour, or serve the first hour, and vice versa, however I said it. But I mean, we need your help. I mean, we had some very faithful people during the pandemic that came and served, and I mean, we were having people serve the whole morning long because we didn't have enough people. Greeters at the door, kids in the nursery. We need your help. We need you to serve. And so that's going to give us that opportunity for you to maybe not have such of a gap. Another cool thing that's potentially going to happen is it's going to open up more space on campus for on-campus groups to start meeting here. Now, I realize, I'll just throw this out there real quick. Some people have asked, well, when are y'all going to do Wednesday night church again? Or when are y'all going to build that satellite location? What are y'all doing? Well, I'll just tell you the honest truth. Our numbers do not justify any third worship right now. It would be a poor steward of staffing and money and everything to start a third worship right now because of the numbers. And so, right now I'm telling you the services are at 9:30 and 11. Man, hopefully if things pick up, we can change that. We will. We still have a very strong desire to potentially plant a church in this area. God shut the door. We look at it now, we're so grateful because we almost stepped off into some deep water because we didn't know a pandemic was coming, but God kept shutting doors for us to be able to start a satellite location, and now we see why. Because that would have gone down the tubes. But we planned, why? Right down the street, and I don't know if you know this, and you may not care, but these are my ramblings, all right? I'm rambling, somewhat rambling. Right down the street, North Main, 3,800 new homes going in. Mont Bellevue, I believe there's 2 different subdivisions going in, which a total of 8,000 homes going in over there within the next year. God is bringing people to us, and our mission is to lead people to Christ and to develop fully devoted followers of Him. But we've got to have soldiers on the field. We got to have folks in the trenches. We got to be prepared. So, I hope offering the different time change will work. It'll hopefully get more people engaged in worship, and our second core value is serving. Hopefully it'll get people into serving. And we think that's it. And so February 6th, mark your calendars. If you've been coming to 11 o'clock, some of you think it starts at 11:15. Sorry, it starts at 11. Shoot for the 9:30. Maybe you'll be here at 11. I won't name any names, but I got some. I want to ask you, will you be faithful? Faithful to that. Not faithful to me. Someone asked me after the first service, well, Tommy, hey, with this kind of sermon, your numbers are going to go up. I said, no, it's not about me. So let's celebrate a little bit. You'll probably feel like I beat on you enough. Even though we've been in the midst of a very difficult time, a very challenging time, I want to say to you as a church, you've been extremely faithful in the spiritual discipline of giving. Extremely faithful. This past year, this past year has been our strongest year financially. We've stayed closer, notice I'm saying it this way, we've stayed closer to our budget than we've ever done in the last several years. Didn't quite meet it yet, but we got close. It really, through staff, being good stewards of the money that you entrust to us, we kind of watched all that very closely, but it's been amazing what's been happening there. And not only just in regular giving, but above and beyond, which, by the way, so Christmas Eve, if you were here for Christmas Eve, every year we do a Christmas Eve offering, buck in the bucket. If you're new to Second, maybe that was the first time you heard about that, maybe you've never heard of it, we just ask people, if you got $1, throw it in the bucket. And everything we take on Christmas Eve, we send it to the Bay Area Homeless Shelter. Well, this past Christmas Eve, with 1,200 people total in attendance, total number, we had right at $4,500 given that night. Isn't that cool? Give yourselves a hand. Give yourselves a hand. I'm also pumped to tell you, you've heard us talking about 5 for 5, right? The big give, we challenged you. We wanted to bless other ministries. And so we said we want to give $5,000 to 5 different ministries and just challenge you to give above and beyond what you normally give. And as of this morning, they came in and gave me an update. I don't know where it came from, but we gave me an update this morning. Our 5 for 5 offering specifically was just over $60,000. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. So you've created a problem. You've created a problem. Now we got to figure out, okay, we're going to send more to these people, and we're going to, we're talking. We're going to grab some other ministries and bless them. And we've learned of a local church that might have a really massive need. We're trying to dig into that more. So, God may be up to something, giving us that extra money. But get this. It doesn't stop there. At the end of December, I told you we're, budget. We always try to meet budget. And so our monthly budget is X amount, $225. Anybody can confirm that? Anyway, $225,000, I think, is the monthly budget. And in the month of December, our budget, y'all gave $90,000 above what we needed for that. $90,000 above. So way to go, church. I'm telling you, don't quit, all right? Doesn't mean we've just, doesn't mean we've got stacks of money sitting around and we're all trying to figure out, one for you, one for me. We don't do it that way. But we've still got a lot to do. But that's another one of our core values, investing. Not only investing in the kingdom financially, investing in the lives of others. So, wow. I never got, okay, I'm going to go to 1 Kings. You're just going to have to hang with me for a second. So 1 Kings, Solomon finally builds the temple. And King David, he wanted to build the temple. God said, no, you're a man of war. You're not going to be able to, I want my house to be a house of prayer. And so Solomon, his son, gets the go-ahead. David did help with preparing for that. Solomon builds it. In chapter 8 of 1 Kings, go back and read it. I don't have time to read the whole thing. This is the celebration. The temple had actually been finished for several months, but Solomon waited till one of the festivals. He calls all the people together. He's celebrating. He's praying this prayer. I want you to get a picture of this because sometimes it's good to be reminded about the posture of prayer sometimes. But according to this story, and the guys are ready. I threw them a curveball the first service. But let's assume the Ark of the Covenant, because this is the big deal. The Ark of the Covenant is being brought into the temple. And they're celebrating, and it's just exciting. And they set the Ark of the Covenant, and Solomon, it says in Scripture, he's kneeling before the Ark of the Covenant, which is the presence of God, with his hands outstretched. How long has it been for you? So he's praising God. He's saying, you have not forgotten us. You God have been faithful to us. You have kept your promises over and over again. And we're just humbled by your presence, and we're humbled by all that you've done for us. And he names off all the things over and over. Please read 1 Kings chapter 8. He's praising God for what's taking place. And then I pick up the story in verse 54 where it says this. Now as Solomon finished offering all this prayer and plea to the Lord, he rose from before the altar of the Lord where he had knelt with his hands outstretched toward heaven. And he stood and he blessed all the assembly of Israel with a loud voice saying, Blessed be the Lord who has given rest to his people Israel according to all that he promised. Get this. Not one word has failed of all his good promise, which he spoke by Moses, his servant. The Lord our God be with us as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us or forsake us, that he may incline our hearts to him, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments and his statutes and his rules, which he has commanded our fathers. Let these words of mine, with which I have pleaded before the Lord, be near. He's saying to the people, be near to the Lord our God day and night, and may he maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel, as each day requires, that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God. He is God, and there is no other. And let me just tell you, folks, God has called us as a church and any other Bible-believing church to proclaim to all the world, there is one God. The Lord, he is God. There is no other. There is no other. And then he says, let your heart, therefore, be wholly true to the Lord our God, walking in his statutes and keeping his commandments as at this day. Again, I highly recommend you read the whole chapter, probably not right now because you're ignoring me if you are. But he stood up from kneeling with his arms outstretched, and he speaks to the people. And I believe the words that Solomon speaks to the people that day are words that you need to hear for 2022. That we would all know and that we would proclaim to all that would hear it, the Lord, there is no other one like the Lord God. That we would follow his commands. I mean, he speaks about God's faithfulness to them over and over. He speaks about not one word of his promises had never failed. Every one of them are true. And I think every one of us in this room, no matter what you faced in the past 2 years, there's no one in this room that could stand, in my opinion, and say, God hadn't been faithful to me. God's been faithful over and over again. God's blessed us over and over again. This past weekend, actually, you're not going to believe this, but she will testify. I was helping doing laundry. I was. Most of it didn't shrink. And I was in our bedroom, and I was folding clothes on the bed, and I had YouTube on the TV, and I love Maverick City Worship. That's one of my favorite worship folks that I like to listen to. And there was a song that I can't tell you how many times I've played this song. It's called A Million Little Miracles. And I've heard this song hundreds of times probably. But I'm standing there in my bedroom, and I hear this line that says, I hope I never get over what you've done. I want to live with an open heart. I want to live like I know who you are. I hope I never get over what you've done. And I'm standing there folding underwear, tears, and in my heart, I was just crying out to God. I think Susan walked in or had been in there. She probably thought I was crazy. But I was thinking, I wasn't saying it out loud, but I was thinking, Lord, is that me? Is that me? Have I forgotten all you've done? Have I given up? Am I okay with mediocre? Am I satisfied with just the ordinary? Do I expect extraordinary? And so I wonder, what about you? Has the past 2 years just taken it out of your sails? Have you gotten over all that God's done for you? Have you forgotten the promises that he's kept over and over again? Is maybe your faithfulness immeasurable? I mean, you can't even measure your faithfulness compared to what he's been faithful to you about. So I close with the words of Solomon that says, let your heart therefore be wholly true to the Lord our God, walking in his statutes and keeping his commandments as at this day. And if you know this song, would you sing it with me? Oh, oh, all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness all my life. One more time. All my life, all my life you have, with every breath oh, I will sing of the goodness. And so, God, thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for running after us. I pray we'd run after you this year.